Welcome to Two Guys.
A girl.
And an MBA.
Reciprocal tariffs is the subject today. We're talking about Donald Trump imposing
As
tariffs
always.
on the whole world, 10% on every country. And here's a graph of geographic chart that shows by country, the darker the blue it is, the higher the tariff, some as high as close to 50% in Cambodia, Vietnam, and some of these African and
Madagascar.
Madagascar, some of these Asian and African countries. What do we think about the reverse tariffs?
I think the first thing to talk about is why they would hit poor Vietnam and Cambodia, right? Like why? But here's the reason why. China uses these neighboring countries to do a majority of the production. So when you think about Cambodia, Vietnam, many years ago, we used to have quotas, and how China would get around their quota. So the quota would simply mean a certain country could only export X amount of something. And when China was maxing out on that, they figured out, rightfully so, is that they'll either what they call label wash it, where they would have it on a border town, they would assemble it in China, they put the label made in Vietnam, and then they would ship it and take advantage of that kind of loophole. It's not even a loophole for quota, but it's the same thing here. These countries are manufacturing bases for Chinese-based companies. Cambodia and Vietnam. Vietnam does a massive amount of footwear. Bangladesh is not here, but Bangladesh is another country that Chinese factories have set up to do clothing. So what they're doing is, if you look at the majority of people on that list, those are all China-influenced companies. And we can talk more about the 10%, 40%, 100% later. But that's kind of why I think.
He put that equation up there, and I saw economists around the world just criticized him and skewered him over that equation. And some of the tariffs just didn't even make sense. It was like,
Do you have the equation? Because
Penguins islands, like islands where only penguins live. This wonderful news that it's like no trade from these islands, but it still has like a high tariffs rate for them. Like sounds like a joke, but
yeah, the equation you put up wasn't what they used. There it is. What they used was it would make everybody cringe. They took the total export from one country versus the United States. They subtracted it and then they divided it. They just took a percentage and they said, hey, well, Vietnam, there's a net of this. We divide it and it's 56%. I mean, I don't know if you're going to plunge the world into chaos. Maybe you want to use a more funky equation like they put up on the screen, but it wasn't that equation. I
it
don't
seemed
think.
pretty unsophisticated. Like the equation
Yeah.
looked complicated, but when you looked at the actual calculation, it looked pretty boneheaded economics, like Financial
Yeah.
Times
primary
and others.
school.
Yeah, a lot of,
Yeah.
Anyway,
yeah.
one of my concern, I see that there are the Taiwan 33 something percent tariff rate. It means Taiwan produce and supply all, like most of the chips for equipment, and it means all our phones, computers, everything with need chips will rise the price. So that's like because it's not, I think one of the biggest production line in Taiwan, and everyone buy it from there. And US also, Apple, for instance, definitely they buy chips in Taiwan. So it is like, okay, for the local people in the US, they got the consequences if they raise the tariffs for Taiwan. So why?
Uh,
Why?
I, well, I think first of all, I think they're going to have some exemptions for certain things. They're not.
Mm,
I mean, he could pick and choose. He just sent the whole world into chaos. He'll pick and choose.
like
The second,
cherry picking, okay,
yeah,
for
yeah,
this
yeah,
country,
okay.
but
And he'll
exclude this and that.
how he's going to justify it is says, well, TCM, Taiwan Semiconductors, is going to invest at 100 billion to build a fab in,
Hmm.
so we're going to exclude them from this. He's going to do that. This is almost he's a smart guy, Donald Trump. He occurs like he just flies from the seat of his pants, but there is a strategy that escapes most people. And I don't even know what the strategy is other than, and yes, if you said some stuff about what his overall strategy is, and it's I don't know if it's interesting. I think I don't know. You maybe want to walk us through
Yeah.
some of the
So two left-leaning economists, Richard Wolff and Yanis Varoufakis, have different ideas about it. So I'll just quote Richard Wolff. He says, if you put a tariff, you make everything coming in from abroad more expensive. This means people buy less of it. They'll shrink their standard of living. If American companies take advantage of the tariff, which they always do by raising their prices, this will also hurt the working class. He's a Marxist. And so he's always thinking of the working class. But he's basically saying when you impose a tariff, you don't know the outcome. There's so many variables, interest rates, exchange rates, currencies, like there's so many variables that you don't know the overall effect it's going to have and whether the net, America exports are going to exceed, what you lose from all the damage of imports. Like you don't know what the balance is going to be in that trade. Varoufakis, who is the former Minister of Finance of Greece and a leading intellectual, has a different idea. He says this is what critics don't understand. They mistakenly think that Trump thinks that his tariffs will reduce the trade deficit on their own. He knows they will not. Their utility comes from the capacity to shock foreign central bankers into reducing domestic interest rates. Consequently, the euro, the yen, and other currencies will devalue. They'll soften relative to the dollar. So he's saying that the boldness of it is going to force foreign central banks to basically buy dollars, so that their own currencies will devalue. And I'm seeing the opposite of that. I'm seeing in Kuwait the dinar appreciate in the first day or two against the dollar, but that's a short-term effect. He's talking long-term effects, and he's saying that this change in the exchange rates will basically, in effect, leave the American consumer prices unaffected, and the foreign banks are going to be funding these tariffs. That's his idea. Richard Wolff disagrees with him. He says you can't really predict that.
I'm just going to quote one of America's greatest philosophers, Mike Tyson. And Mike Tyson said, everybody's a hero until you get punched in the face, right? So it's kind of like Donald Trump just punching everybody in the face. If you talk tough, euro. If you talk tough, but let me just punch you in the face and see what you guys do. I don't know if that's an economic strategy, right? It's and I think in our class, we talked a lot about modeling. We did simulations, right? But one of the rules our profs always told us is like, this is not the truth, right? There's just so many factors, and a model, you can't say that there's going to be truth. So right now, we're seeing all these moving parts and levers going, but I don't know. I mean, it's going to be tough to pull this off and predict how it's all going to settle.
Please consider subscribing below.
Thank you for being with us. Please leave your comments, feedback, what you think about us, and see you in the next podcast. Bye.